Welcome back to the Hemlane Hustle, the podcast where we talk with the people actually doing the work of building and running rental businesses, especially in markets that don't always make the headlines. I'm Dana Dunford, CEO of Hemlane, and today's conversation is a really important one if you're looking for passive cash flow, which I think 100% of real estate investors are looking for at this time. My guest today is Charlie Lucroy, the broker and owner of Lucroy Residential in Jackson, Mississippi. Charlie has built his business right in the middle of the market that's often misunderstood, especially by those out of state investors who see some numbers on spreadsheets without fully understanding the realities on the ground. What I love most about Charlie's approach is that he's honest about both the challenges and the opportunities. He's deeply rooted in Jackson. He understands the neighborhoods, the risks, what it actually takes to operate a successful business there. And fun fact, Charlie has the highest rated reviews of any property manager who I have ever seen. And it's no surprise once you start working with him on why he is so highly rated. In this episode, we're going to talk about what investors often get wrong when they enter secondary and tertiary markets, how to think about the risk realistically, and why partnering with the right local expert can make or break your long-term success. Charlie, I'm excited to have you here today. Welcome to the Hemlane Hustle.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So, Charlie, I just want to start with for those who don't know you, quick background, how you got started in real estate, and then also the Jackson market.
Sure. So in 98, I was completing my first stint in the Navy and I was getting ready to re-up. And my dad says, "Hey, I'm doing this house flipping thing here back home. And I want you, before you re-up, come home and let me show you what I'm doing, see if this has any interest." I said, "Okay." Within, I guess, 3 months later, I'm out of the Navy and I'm riding in the work van of my dad's handyman for the next summer, learning how to replace toilets and windows. And because we were doing all this investment property, which is, and they were the lower income Section 8 type properties. That kind of got me into it.
Great. And then what led you to focus on real estate investors, the property management side, really like property management is obviously core to this success. But what led you to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and expand and give all of my knowledge to investors? Because Charlie, if I were you, I would just go ahead and raise the capital and buy the properties myself. But I think in some selfless way, you are helping investors also get that cash flow that you've seen with your own personal properties. So walk me through this focus on investors and helping them purchase and then manage their properties.
Okay. So the first part of my career was real estate. I say started in 98 was totally investments, no property management other than managing my own properties. And that's by the seat of my pants. So you're buying these houses and you're trying to place tenants, and like most homeowners, you just want to put the fastest one in there and get in there and collect your rent. And I'm going and I'm knocking doors on Saturdays, and I'll take your cash and I'll take it. I'm just running it because that's an investment side. So doing that along with flips, that was good for the first 10 years, 11 years of doing this. And then I had the opportunity to move to Florida, where doing some wholesaling and buy and sell. And I met a gentleman that brought me in his company that had a mainly property management, sales and property management for third party. But it was not for investors. It was for what I call accidental owners, or people that have homes that need a transfer, or just it wasn't a good time to sell at that time. So they just put them up for rent. So I spent the next 9 years after that in Florida doing property management only for corporations, where it was not investor led. In fact, most of the companies I worked for didn't want investors. They wanted higher end rentals. They were easier to do your process and procedures to manage properties for. So most of those did not want investors. So I saw the opportunity to take what I've learned in the corporate management world and put it in my investment background. And we were going to do this in Florida, but also put a branch in Jackson, being that was my hometown, because I knew all the investment properties and opportunities that were in Jackson and a lot of the investors. Didn't realize that we started off with 22 houses and under management when we opened Lucroy Residential. And within 6 months, we hit 100 doors in Jackson, and we saw there was a huge need for property management, I won't say done the right way, but done differently than it's been done in the past in Jackson. So we, meaning my family and I, we pulled up stakes and moved back to home and just focused strictly on investors and property management in the Jackson market.
Yeah, I want to actually jump to what you just mentioned, which is a really important point. One, I think that fast growth shows that the market didn't have the right property management in place until you went into it of really it's a tough market, which we're going to get into. But also I think what has also very recently happened that I think both you and I have witnessed in the Jackson market. Can you talk a little bit about the past 12 months, and you can even go back to before that if you want, what is happening in the Jackson market that services this need of stronger property management that's needed, as well as obviously looking at the investment opportunities and what makes a good investment property?
Sure. So Jackson's always been considered, if you go to bigger pockets, you go to a lot of places. Jackson's always been a great place to invest because of the price point of the home and the amount of rent you can get. The cash flow is great. There's only a few other markets in the country that fit under this. I think that's Cleveland. There's a couple of markets, but I won't speak of those because I don't know. But Jackson is one that I'm going to give you an example. Back in the day, 2 years ago, you could buy a nice rental, make it Section 8 compatible, and for 65,000, $75,000, and it would rent for $1,200, $1,300. Those are great numbers. You don't get
Safe.
those anywhere else. What's happened in the last 12 months, though, is I think some people saw that market and they took advantage of, they were, we had investors that were not local. So local investors coming in buying houses. I use a lipstick on a pig is what I call it. We're just going to throw some paint and make it look good on pictures and sell them to turnkey to other out-of-state investors that didn't know any better. So you have no local contact, no local representation, and the price gouging began. So you saw a uptick in the last 12 months of the price points go up while the quality of what they were selling went down. So when you have a few large groups that come in to do that, it does hurt our market, our local market, especially our local investors that rely on out-of-state investors. We do have a number, I think every investor here has some type of out-of-state investor that comes in. And when this happens, it really hurts because now that house that our local guys and we could have bought for 65, 70, these out-of-state investors are selling to other state investors for 110,
Yeah.
120, and it's just not, the numbers don't work as well. They work. You still can cash flow, but they don't work the way they're supposed to do in our market.
Yeah, I was going to say from a cash flow perspective, Jackson to me has to be one of the it has to be the best number one or one of the top five best places to invest from a cash flow perspective. However, one thing I have to ask you about here is eviction rates, especially with those properties you just mentioned, where an out of state investment company is coming into Jackson and then selling to an out of state investor. They don't know streets, they don't know neighborhoods, they don't know locations. And they're looking at some numbers on paper, and then they're not factoring in any sort of evictions that they have, or based on credit score requirements, if they have something higher, that days on market are going to be way too high. And so they're not really balancing that. Like the formula is set on their pro formas to be the same across the nation. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you think these properties that you mentioned normally would go for $65,000 out of state investment companies that are coming in are jacking them up to 110,000 by just putting some fresh paint on them and reselling them to out of state investors? Do you think those properties make sense to invest in? What is your thought on neighborhoods as well and just growth opportunities in Jackson?
Yes, let's start with this. So people like to look at some of these groups that came in, they sold a higher price point because they were guaranteeing they were pushing Section 8 and the FMR fair market rate on their websites. And they're saying the FMR for area code 39212 is $1,700 for a 4 bedroom. So let's just find a 4-bedroom house that has 4 walls and a roof that we can say it's a 4-bedroom and it's going to rent for $1,700 a month, guaranteed rent Section 8. So therefore, we can sell them for 110. But that's not reality because our Section 8 office here do not pay, that 1,700, that misconception is that 1,700 is guaranteed. That's not how it works. The Section 8 offices here, that's the most they will pay for a zip code, but that's just for on paper. They're typically paying about 70% of that FMR. But really what that comes down to is they have to look at the comps of that actual street, not the zip code of the street. And that's where it really comes into knowing knowing the streets, knowing which end of the street, because it's like any other real estate. When you buy houses, there's a new neighborhood 2 blocks over that may be totally different when you're pulling comps
Yeah.
from this one. Section 8 and that organization, they do the same thing. They're going to pull comps from as close as they can. And if it's not on the right, if that street has lower value or that little block or that little area, that FMR is going to be much lower than what they have stated on there. That FMR just states that's the most they will pay. But I've never had Section 8 pay the most for any of these houses. So I think that knowing your local and knowing that part is key to knowing that, hey, it's not the zip code. It's this couple of streets over here that do a little bit better. Hey, this street has half the houses are abandoned, where this street over here, you've got half of them that may be homeowners. So
Yeah.
that's how really being your local, having local representation is key.
Now, I have so many questions on Section 8. For those investors listening to this show, there's pros and cons to Section 8. I think a lot of investors who go into the Jackson market go into it for that guaranteed rent that they can get with Section 8. Is the number and percentage of vouchers increasing in Jackson? Do you feel like that the number of vouchers is going down? Where do you see Section 8 going in the next couple of years?
I don't know if I can speak for the next couple of years. I know in Jackson. So during this time, the last 12 months, we've seen a huge influx of properties that are going to be Section 8 ready. So there's no shortage of houses available for rent in Section 8. That all these owners want Section 8. When people get vouchers from Section 8 and MRHA, there's two main offices that offer Section 8 here in Jackson. The main one being MRHA. They're not pigeonholed to Jackson. They're not pigeonholed to low income. I think there's a misconception that people think that, oh, if they're Section 8, they must be low income and live in low income areas. They don't. They
Yeah.
have a voucher for a 3-bedroom. And I use the comparison. If I have a voucher for a rental car and I can rent a 4-door sedan that's a Lexus or a 4-door Taurus, which one am I going to get? I'm
Yeah.
probably going to go with the Lexus.
Yes.
So when someone has a 3-bedroom voucher and for example, there's probably 60 houses on the market right now in Jackson, just for rent. I'm just throwing that out there. It's probably more. So if they have a voucher for 3-bedroom, they're going to find the nicest 3-bedroom you can find that has new paint, that has the new cabinets. They just didn't throw some paint on there and do away with it. If they can't find that in Jackson, they're going to go to the outskirts of Clinton, Pearl, Brandon, that still have the rentals that people will pay more for them. Section 8 will pay more for the landlord because the comps are better. So they're not pigeonholed to just Jackson. Now, there are less Section 8 available homes in these areas, but nonetheless, they have a huge area to choose from, not just the low income areas that people look at. So there's a misconception, I think, that Section 8 is just for these lower income and that's what you're going to get is going to be guaranteed rent. And I do see that from my experience in the last 6 months with Section 8, especially with MRHA here local, the comps are lower. The FMR, what they're paying is much lower than it used to be.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing near the 100% guaranteed tenants that we used to get. In fact, every month I'm getting more reductions in what Section 8 pays and put more on the tenant to pay because their income changes or because something changes with their system. So we're not the 100% Section 8 tenants are coming fewer because they have more income.
Yeah. And I think just for those listeners out there who haven't actually walked the Jackson market, which is probably 99% of you, what Charlie just said, I really want you to take home and remember. Like these properties, I've seen it in pictures before going out to visit Charlie. It looks great, these houses, the photos of them. And it wasn't until we went to, I think, 30 houses in one day, Charlie, and going through and then actually physically being in them and being like, okay, if I have a voucher for Section 8 and I could rent this place, and then we'd go to another one or that one, it was very clear it's okay, I'll choose that other one. And then the investors, why isn't my place renting? And it was that kind of fresh lipstick or not the neighborhood that the Section 8 wants. And this is where it's interesting because obviously I'm in California where Section 8 is much more challenging for a Section 8 tenant to get a house. In they almost don't have the power in that relationship in a lot of ways. And that's not everywhere in California. That was much more of a blanket statement, but I've seen it in certain regions in Jackson, a lot of times these Section 8 tenants, because a portion of their rent is paid by the government through the Section 8 program, housing vouchers, it's guaranteed rent, they have a lot more power in that sense. And they are going to choose, to what Charlie's point was, the property in the neighborhood and on the street or the certain side of the street that makes the best sense if they have a 3 bedroom or 4 bedroom voucher. And so it is really important when you go into these markets to be working with someone like Charlie, born and raised there, knows the market so well, knows the streets, and has dealt with this every day. Because cash flow for those with Section 8, I don't think some folks understand why they're not cash flowing in certain for certain reasons. And what Charlie said was just spot on with it. Charlie, one other thing about Section 8 that I don't think investors talk a lot about or consider: inspections. So you want to reduce your days on market. You want to get a tenant right in. You don't want to be paying a mortgage, an alligator property where you're paying the mortgage every month and your tenant's rent is not coming in. With Section 8, there's also a delay where you can't get the tenant in until the inspection passes. Just talk about that timeline because I think that's really important for investors who say, I would love a Section 8 tenant, but they have to understand that there may be a delay in getting everything solidified for the voucher. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The Section 8 program here, I use MRHA because they handle 75% of the Section 8 vouchers in Jackson area. JHA, Jackson Housing Authority, handles the other group. So from the time you submit an application, you get an application from a tenant. When time you submit that, you're a minimum 3 weeks to 4 weeks from getting an inspection date. They're just backed up. They only have about 2 or 3 inspectors, I believe, right now. They're usually running way behind. By the time, if you're missing anything in your documents, for example, when you just buy a property and you're ready to put it on the market, you probably don't have a recorded deed yet. But you've got to have that recorded deed before you can even submit the application. So if it's a new property, you've got to wait weeks just to get that. So you got to submit all your application and all your paperwork to get the inspection. We've got a pretty thorough inspection guideline. And so once you get that inspection day, say it's 4 weeks out, hopefully, then you've got to go through it. I've yet to ever pass one perfectly based on, I shouldn't say that, I have, but those are the people that spend the money on the houses to make them right the first go around.
Yeah.
Section 8, they'll come out there and say, hey, we don't provide you a punch list. We've got a lot of investors say, hey, let's do the minimum to get it through Section 8 to pass it. So when you go in with that mentality and the minimum for the inspection, and your inspector goes out there and he sees that you've done the minimum, that's going to hurt them, their idea, even though they say they don't create the rents, their machine does, or their software. I don't believe that. They can't tell me what they want to, but they've got to put in their opinion about that property to get some type of computer for that computer to spit it out. It's garbage in, garbage out. So they put in something, and if they see that your windows are still painted on these old windows and you've done the minimum work to pass it, they're going to start checking off this failed, and they'll find everything they can to fail you because they want you to fix it up the right way. So now you've got to re-inspect it within a week. You've got to spend more money. So between all the sun, you're looking at a 45-day easy process to get a Section 8 tenant processed in. I think that's a minimum of 45 days.
And that's after you've done the application, background, and credit check. So
Correct.
you're talking about two months.
That's not even time on market. You're correct. That's just from
Yeah.
the time you get an actual tenant that submits their HAP application, RTA packet.
Yeah.
I've always told investors, I don't see it rose-colored glasses. This is not unicorns and rainbows here in Jackson. There's definitely an opportunity here in Jackson to do a lot of good things, but you've got to buy it right and you've got to be reasonable in what your expectations are of rent. You can't buy a $50,000 house and expect a $1,700 a month rent. That's just not reasonable. And that's what a lot of people have sold in the past. And it's just not feasible. You can buy a $75,000 house and get for about $1,200 on Section 8, and it passes everything, and it doesn't have to be crazy. I look at Jackson similar to, Danny, you asked me, and I glossed over this, or I totally missed it, the evictions. So yes, there are a
Hmm.
number of evictions that go on in Jackson. A lot of our evictions are taking over properties that were already mismanaged, or tenants placed themselves because they panicked and they put someone in there that had a heartbeat and a deposit. So those are things that we've fixed. So the eviction rate is high in Jackson. We still feel that we do find that there are good tenants and good residents that want to live in Jackson that can pass a basic credit score, background check, and a verification of income. And they don't have to jump through the hoops of Section 8. And we feel that they do pretty good. It's not perfect. It's not a science. It's just not a science. So you do have to look for, there's some eviction time that goes into place, especially if you haven't had someone professional place your tenant. A lot of, I see lazy real estate investors, they place some that were already tenant occupied and they didn't probably tell the truth that they were 3 months behind. They probably wiped out debt
Yeah.
that said, yeah, they're paying, everything's paid in full, everything's good. And that wasn't the case. So transparency is key, honesty, integrity. You've got to have all of that, but you've got to be local to, I think, to really understand that.
Yeah. Those numbers you just gave for everyone listening to this show, it's $75,000 you can rent a place for $1,200 a month. I would take that all day, any day. And very few cities, if any others in the US, can get these types of numbers for real estate investing. We also just heard about Section 8 and some of the potential downsides when every investor says, I want a Section 8 tenant because it's guaranteed rent by the government, at least a portion of it. You also still have to be really realistic of these delays, the types of properties, the tenants having their choice of which one they want. So, how do you, Charlie, mitigate that risk? So, if I come into the market tomorrow and say, Charlie, I want to buy a place in Jackson, doesn't necessarily need to be a Section 8 tenant because you could get them in faster if you don't have that 45 delay on the inspection. How can I, as an investor, have my anxiety level go down where it's okay? I know I might have an eviction. There's always that chance, but at least have that mitigated. What should I be looking for? What should I be talking to you about, Charlie?
I think first off, have a good product. If you have a house and you decide to do the minimum to the house and you're not going to do any kind of, you're not going to, people in Jackson, lower income people, they like pretty houses too. They like nice things and they'll take
Mhm.
care of it. But if you give them the bare minimum of a house, that's the tenant you're going to attract. Don't be afraid of buying because you can buy the houses and have it locally rehabbed. For example, have your property manager. If it's not me, have your other property manager. You can buy something through a local agency that is owned and they oversaw the rehab, that you can hold their feet to the fire of, hey, you said this was this. Maybe get some kind of type of guarantees of some sort of, like, I know when we sell our properties, we'll sell them rent ready, that's available. If I'm managing it, well, then I'm not going to come to you the next week. Oh yeah, by the way, I moved the tenant in and XYZ is going off and it's all broken.
Yeah.
That's how we would do it. We have skin in the game a little bit, as I'm sure other investors here locally do. So definitely to help that. You also don't have to buy the $75,000 house. And we have other markets in Jackson and even the outskirts that you can buy $150,000 house that rents for, $1,800, $1,900. You don't have to stay just in lower income. We've got a wide variety of different type homes you can buy, but if I do look at Jackson and the what I call the South Jackson area, maybe it's not, I'm not a stock guy, but I look at penny stocks. You can buy a house, you can find that gem of $55,000 and everything looks great. You get the perfect tenant in there that comes in, a market tenant that pays $1,200 a month and doesn't miss it. Now, she may bring it to you in a check or a money order and put it in your Dropbox, but she's not going to miss her rent and she's going to take care of your house. You'll never hear from her. Those happen all the time, but I can't sell you that. That is,
Yeah.
it's not, it's not every time or it's not 70% of the time, but I'd say that you've got a good 50-50 chance of getting one of those, I call them a unicorn type situation where you buy something in the high 50s, low 60s, and you get a great tenant and you never hear from them and they're there for 5 years. It happens quite often.
Yep.
And those are great. And I've got a few of them and I love them. And I've got a lady that she calls me. She goes, every month, about the 2 days before the first, I'll know that she put it in the Dropbox. And then she's going to call me or she's going to text me, Miss Lucroy, I put your check in the Dropbox. And then she's going to call
Yep.
the following Monday and make sure we got her check.
Yeah.
So we have those happen all the time. And those are great people to work for. And there's tons of those type tenants and residents in Jackson.
Yeah, I love it. You and I spoke about that. Sometimes those who are like the least tech enabled that we
Yes.
struggle through, go make sure you go through the application are always some of the best ones. And so definitely hear you on that. Let's talk about, we spoke about some of the struggles with obviously Section 8, with the market in general, the potential of evictions, which you have to be very mindful of. Let's talk about the opportunity in Jackson. So I think most majority of listeners have never been to Jackson, Mississippi. They don't even know about what the economy is. Like, what drives the economy there? Where do you see it in 3 to 5 years? Everything from the employment to growth opportunity. You moved back from Florida, very lively place in Florida, to move back to Jackson, your hometown. Tell us, you wouldn't have made that move if you weren't optimistic about the market. Tell us a bit more.
Well, we've got a new mayor, and I think he's doing some really good things for the city that I think the last leadership did not, I don't think they had the city's best interest in place. Jackson has a long way to go. There are some great things happening in Jackson downtown. You've got still got the Fondren area, Bellhaven, downtown partners doing some great things down there. So you still have a workforce and a blue collar force that can't move out to these outskirts. They still have to live in the city. So being that overall in the whole metro area, the Tri-County area, we're 500,000 people. There's only so far you can go. So Jackson will continue to have to try to fix itself in the, I call it, the inner city. So there's always going to be this market has its ups and downs over the last 20 years. We see it 3 years ago when a hedge fund will come in and they'll start buying up everything and they drive the prices up. And then the local investors and
Mhm.
everything else have to wait for it. They come back down. Kind of like right now, the market's correcting itself right now from what happened this
Mhm.
past 12 months. And it's going to come back down and people will start buying again. And you're going to see a resurgence of rentals coming up. They're going to rent faster. There won't be an overflow of rentals. But so I don't know if Jackson's going to grow. It's not going to be like Detroit was. It's going to be the new Detroit. But I think that it's going to make for investors. It's always going to be here. It's
Mhm.
always going to be opportunities here. That's I don't have any future. Don't see any great growth, but I don't see any retraction either. I just think that it's a great place to still invest for cash flow. You won't get a ton of appreciation. I'll be honest with you. If you pay 75, and I'm just throwing the 75. It's a really
Yeah.
round conservative number. There are homes you can pay less for, but I'm trying to use real conservative numbers here. If you pay 75 for that house, that's probably going to be worth 75 3 years from now. It probably won't be
Yeah.
worth it. It's not going to drop down to 50. And you may one day get an appraisal of 100,000 because some people came in, but it's going to be worth 75 in what I call, real market value. So
Yeah.
once you understand that there's not going to be the huge appreciation like you get in Florida. In Florida, they don't care about cash flow because appreciation is great. That's probably a lot of places are. That's not the case here in the Jackson market.
Yeah. Although I could see it in 5, 6 years, some sort of large Amazon facility or something coming into the market and really changing the game. And so while you don't want to put it into your numbers in your pro forma, I think there's a lot of opportunity in Jackson, especially where it's located in the southeast and stuff like that. So I still think there's quite a bit of an opportunity, but I love, Charlie, how honest you are about the market. And that kind of leads to my next question for you. So I always use you as my benchmark for how every property manager should be. You are on top of everything. I always say if I email Charlie at 12:01 a.m., he is emailing me back at 12:02 a.m. You're on top of everything. You're making sure that you're very fair, always honest. You're also really great with the tenants as well. Like you really follow the legally binding contract, but you always know there's certain things where you got to pick up the call, talk to them, etc. Walk me through a little bit more about how you build that trust, build out that property management process. What do you think are the biggest things that property managers, especially in Jackson, get wrong? Because I know you've seen this huge growth in your business, and I think in part it's because how you run your operations versus others.
It's communication. So, it's not just me. We have a great team. My wife moved here. She did not move
Yeah.
here to get into the property management business or the real estate business, but she is now because of our growth. But we've got some great teams with Zach and Jalecia here,
Yeah.
great vendors. So I couldn't do it all that. What I see is our communication is probably better than most. We're going to
Hmm.
respond one way or the other. It may not be what you want to hear. It may not be a solution that minute, but you're going to hear from us. And especially, and I'll be honest with you, I do more of the owner facing than I do tenant facing. So we think that both owners and tenants have to have it. With Hemlane and with you guys, the tenant, it makes the transparency with tenants and the communication makes it a lot easier along with our local staff here. Owners, they usually get left behind, honestly. They're usually left in the dark depending on which software is being used, what settings that software has been set by the property manager. You can know if you're in all kinds of different softwares, you can adjust those settings where that the owners can find out as little or as much as they want to.
Yeah.
A lot of property managers don't want to provide a lot. They either want to have a conversation or they don't want to hear anything. They don't want to share much. For us, I think our growth and how we do it is because we are very communicative to our owners. We do respond, I'd say at a minimum 24 hours, but usually it's same day. And sometimes I can get we do have to refrain our owners a little bit, saying, "Hey, look, don't expect me to text you. If you text me at 7:30 at night, one thing I prefer email, but if that's just how you're going to do it, I'm probably not going to respond back to you at 7:30 for a general call that you can get off our software. But nonetheless, we're going to respond. We don't play ostrich. If there's something bad with your property, if something bad happened, we're going to call and tell you, be it good or bad. If you need to yell at us or yell at someone else or whatever, that's fine. But we're not going to try to fix it and sugarcoat it or cover it up, and you find out later because you got a big bill. We're gonna hit it off and let you know what happened right away. So I think that for us, that's what separates us a lot from most.
Yeah, I think that communication is so key. You don't want to wake up in 2 months and say, I didn't know. And so that transparency, I think, is so important. But also, in the transparency, it shows that Lucroy, you guys are working around the clock. And I don't think that a lot of PMs put in the amount of time and effort that you guys are putting in around the clock to make sure that your clients are well taken care of, their properties are well taken care of, and their tenants are well taken care of. Charlie, I love everything that you've said. Are you ready for our lightning round? I've got three questions for you.
Sure, let's go.
Best advice you've ever received in real estate?
Probably from my dad. It goes back to really everything, but relationships matter, be it with your teams, your staff, your colleagues, clients. Relationships are key to everything, which, like that, again, my dad preaches that. That's what I've been taught.
Yeah. What is the one mistake that you see real estate investors and landlords make over and over again?
Trying to do it themselves. I think I see a lot of investors think that they can, if they just do it themselves, they look at property managers as we're just going to mark things up. I can get it done cheaper myself. I've done construction in my house before. I know what it costs. I think that doesn't really translate. So I see a lot of do-it-yourselfer managers come in and try to save a penny, and it costs them in the end. That's it.
Yeah, especially in the Jackson market. Being
Yes.
there, everything from having to potentially take out the HVAC as you're showing the units to other things of that boots eyes, ears on the ground. I could not agree more. What excites you most about the future of your business?
So we're growing. We're excited about our property management side. We have, due to a number of clients, we've really bypassed, haven't done much with helping investors find deals and sell their investment properties. We just really focused on the management. But we're separating our sales side from our management side, where we still totally focus on our management side with Lucroy Residential. But we'll have another arm with Next Home Concordance. We're franchising our sales side to really help with our investors and other homeowners. We will do it, but it'll be completely for sales, helping buyers find deals, investors find deals, help them sell. So where it still doesn't impede on us trying to do our management side, because that is key. So we're really excited about joining franchising with Next Home and really doing that.
Yeah. What excites me most, I think what I've heard from this entire conversation we've had today is that everyone should be looking at the Jackson market and be looking at it with you, Charlie, because I think there's huge opportunities to cash flow immediately, which I know investors are looking for, but also huge risks. And if you can balance that and work with Charlie, who's been born, raised there, knows the market so well, and has been operating day to say, hey, I've got another house down the street. That is not doing well. So this one most likely won't as well. It really helps just make sure you mitigate that risk, both in the purchase and the sale and the management. So Charlie, if our listeners want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
You can reach out to via email at Charlie, Charlie, at lucroyresidential.com. Visit our website, lucroyresidential.com. You'll see our pricing and services and areas that we manage. You can see what we have to offer for rent. You'll see everything from high-end branded rentals to our typical Section 8. It gives you a feel of everything that we offer.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Charlie. I know how valuable your time is. And so, really appreciate you letting our listeners know a little bit more about the Jackson market, which I think is one that has huge opportunity here as long as you're working with the right people.
Yeah. Thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure.